bloody shadows of Silent Creek. Silent Creek was a quiet town, lost in the misty forests. It seemed as though time had stopped here, and life flowed slowly, like the water in the local river. But everything changed that night when the moon hid behind a bloody eclipse. That same night, people began to disappear. First, it was a lone traveler, then a young girl who was returning home late. The townsfolk spoke of the forest, of its silence, which seemed to breathe death, and of the mansion on the hill that had been abandoned for decades. Legend spoke of the Master of Blood, but most just laughed, dismissing it as old tales. Emilia came to Silent Creek as a journalist. She had long been searching for a sensational story that could take her career to the next level. The disappearances in a small town amidst the forests seemed like the perfect story. When she arrived, she sensed something strange. The locals greeted her cautiously, avoiding conversation. An old man at the local shop whispered just one thing to her: "Stay away from the hill." But this only piqued her curiosity. The next morning, Emilia set out for the forest to take some photos. A thick fog enveloped everything around her, and the silence was so dense that even the sound of her steps felt foreign. On the way, she encountered Liam, a hunter who lived nearby. He was grim and silent, but when he learned why Emilia was there, his eyes flashed with anger. "You don't understand what you're playing with," he said. It turned out that Liam had lost his sister, who had disappeared in the forest months ago. Since then, he had been trying to unravel this mystery, but everyone who tried to help disappeared. In the evening, Emilia returned to her motel. But that night, she couldn't sleep. Something whispered to her outside the window. She looked out and saw a figure standing under a streetlight. It was a woman with pale skin and eyes that glowed in the dark. The figure pointed toward the forest, then vanished. Armed with her camera, Emilia decided to follow her. The forest at night felt different, alive. The trees closed in around her, and strange sounds echoed from the depths. She reached the old mansion, which had long collapsed and appeared abandoned. But from its windows, a faint red light shone through. Inside, she smelled blood. In the large hall stood a long table covered with black velvet. On it lay an ancient book, its pages covered in strange symbols. Suddenly, the doors slammed shut, and he appeared in the hall. A tall man with pale skin, blood-colored eyes, and a predatory smile. "Welcome to my home," he said. It was the master. He explained that he had lived there for hundreds of years, feeding on the blood of those who dared disturb his peace. But he didn't kill Emilia right away. "You're not like the others. There's something special in your blood," he said, approaching. Emilia realized that escaping would be impossible. But then Liam appeared. Armed with a wooden stake, he charged at the vampire. A struggle ensued, during which the master revealed his true strength. He was faster and stronger, but Liam refused to give up. In that moment, Emilia found the book and saw an incantation that could be used against the vampire. She began to read, and her voice echoed through the hall like a bell. The master charged toward her, but the incantation began to take effect. The red light flooded the mansion, and the master screamed as he disintegrated into ash. The forest outside the mansion fell silent, and the stillness became peaceful. Emilia and Liam barely escaped the mansion. They stood at the edge of the forest, watching as the first rays of the sun rose over Silent Creek. The town had become quieter, but the mysteries of its forests would remain in the memories of those who survived that night. Emilia and Liam silently stood at the forest edge, watching as the mansion slowly crumbled. The shadows that had seemed alive melted in the dawn light, and the air, which had been thick and heavy, became clearer. It felt as if nature itself had sighed in relief. But despite the seeming destruction of the threat, Emilia couldn't shake the feeling that this was not the end. "It was too easy," she muttered, gazing at the pile of ashes that had been the master. Liam, sitting on the ground, wiping blood from a cut on his arm, sighed heavily. "Easy? I wouldn't say that," he replied, though his voice lacked conviction. Emilia pulled out her recorder, which had miraculously remained intact. She listened to the recordings made during the reading of the incantation and realized that the final words had been cut off. "I didn't finish the incantation," she whispered, fear creeping into her eyes. Liam stood up, his gaze becoming alert. "What does that mean?" he asked. Amelia didn't have time to answer before she heard a strange sound coming from the forest. It was a whisper. The same whisper she had heard that night outside her motel window. It grew louder, as if dozens of voices were whispering directly into her head. Amelia covered her ears, but it didn't help. Liam couldn't hear anything, but he realized something was wrong when he saw Amelia's face turn pale. "We have to go," she said, grabbing his hand. They returned to the town, where life was beginning to stir. The townsfolk stared at them with curiosity and concern. Amelia noticed Olivia, a young woman who worked at the local bookstore and knew the legends. She had always kept her distance, but now she looked at Amelia as if she had been waiting for her. "You've woken him up," Olivia said when Amelia and Liam entered the bookstore. "Who?" Liam asked, but his voice sounded nervous. "The master was only a servant. The real evil still slumbers. What you read in the book didn't destroy him. It only awakened him." "Now he's hungry," Olivia replied. Amelia tried to understand the meaning of the girl's words. She pulled out the book she had taken from the mansion and placed it on the table. Olivia flipped through the pages, her face gradually becoming more worried. "This isn't an incantation to kill the master. It was an awakening spell," she whispered. At that moment, the ground beneath their feet trembled. Liam grabbed a knife, and Amelia saw a strange shadow forming outside the window on the street. It resembled black smoke, but constantly changed shape. The shadow was approaching the bookstore, leaving a trail of dead plants behind it. "We need to run," Olivia said, but Amelia stood still, staring at the book. "No, we have to find a way to stop this," she replied, quickly flipping through the pages. She realized there was another incantation in the book, but it was much more complicated and required a sacrifice. "What kind of sacrifice?" Liam asked when Amelia explained. She looked at him, tears in her eyes. "The sacrifice is me. The book needs the blood of the one who awakened the evil to seal it forever," she replied. Liam vehemently disagreed, but Olivia knew there was no other way. The shadow was already drawing near, and they had little time. Amelia understood that it was her fault, and she was ready to pay the price. She began to recite the incantation, even as Liam tried to stop her. When the words were spoken, the shadow burst into the bookstore, but the incantation began to take effect. The shadow howled, twisted, and began to melt in the light emanating from Amelia. She stood in the center of the room, illuminated by the light, as her body started to dissolve with the shadow. When it was over, Olivia and Liam were left alone. The book turned to ash, and the town seemed to finally settle into peace. But Liam knew that it would never be the same. He looked at the dawn and felt that the sacrifice had not been in vain. Amelia had saved Silent Creek, but at the cost of her own life. Her story would live on in their hearts as a reminder that evil should never be trifled with. A few weeks passed. Silent Creek returned to its normal life. The forest seemed less ominous, and even the silence no longer invoked fear. However, Liam couldn't find peace. Every night he dreamed of Amelia, her voice, her eyes, how she stood in the midst of that light, sacrificing herself for them all. It unsettled him. One evening, he returned to the place where the mansion once stood. Now, it was just a pile of stones, covered in moss. But to his surprise, Liam saw something strange. Amidst the ruins lay a red rose, fresh and undamaged. It seemed to be waiting for him. He picked it up and smelled its faint fragrance, which reminded him of Amelia. Along with the rose, Liam found a small piece of paper, which looked like it had been left intentionally. It had one sentence written on it: "This is not the end." Liam returned to Olivia with this discovery. She, confused, examined the paper and the rose. "This isn't just a sign. It's a message," she said, closely inspecting the writing. She explained that such words were often used in magical rituals as a warning. The evil we thought we destroyed may still exist, she said, her eyes drifting away. That same night, Liam heard a noise near his house. He grabbed his rifle and went outside. Before him, in the shadows of the trees, stood a figure. Its outline resembled Amelia. "It can't be," he whispered. But as the figure approached, he saw that it truly was her, though her eyes glowed with a pale white light. "Liam," she spoke, her voice almost the same as his memory of it, but somewhat distant. "I couldn't leave completely. A part of me is still here, and that part is connected to what we awoke. It wants to return, and now it seeks me as its guide." Liam couldn't understand if it was truly Amelia or just a reflection of her created by dark forces. "How can we stop this?" he asked. But she didn't answer, only extended her hand, and a strange amulet appeared in her palm, made of silver and embedded with a red stone. "This amulet is the key. You must find the ancient source deep in the forest. This is the place where the evil was sealed thousands of years ago, and only there can it be destroyed forever." Amelia, or her spirit, dissolved into the mist, leaving Liam with the amulet in his hand. He knew this could be a trap, but he also understood that doing nothing would be even worse. Together with Olivia, they set out to the forest, armed with the knowledge from the book that Olivia had painstakingly rewritten before it burned, and everything they could find in the town. The forest came alive again. Shadows chased them, whispers echoed from every direction, and the ground beneath their feet trembled from time to time. Finally, they reached the place where Amelia had said the source was located. It was an old, overgrown site, where water flowed in a blood-red stream. The amulet began to glow, and the ground beneath their feet split open, revealing a massive stone altar. Olivia unfolded her notes and began reading the incantation. But this time, the evil wasn't going to wait. Shadows from the forest gathered into a massive vortex, trying to disrupt the ritual. Liam, defending Olivia, fought invisible enemies, while Amelia, who had appeared again, helped them in whatever way she could. The incantation was completed, and the altar erupted with bright light. The vortex dissipated, and the earth shook, as if nature itself was crying out in pain. The shadows disappeared, and everything grew still. Olivia and Liam knew that this was the final confrontation. Amelia stood beside them, but her body began to fade, this time for good. "Thank you," she said, tears in her eyes. "I am finally free." She vanished in a burst of light, leaving them alone. Liam and Olivia returned to Silent Creek. The forest was quiet, but this time, peaceful. They knew they had paid a high price, but they had saved not just the town, but perhaps the whole world. Returning to Silent Creek, Liam and Olivia felt exhausted but at the same time relieved. The town had finally become peaceful, and the forest no longer seemed ominous. Yet, they both knew that what had happened had changed their lives forever. Liam left his hunting cabin on the edge of the forest and moved closer to the center of town. He often visited Olivia's bookstore, where they would spend evenings talking about what had happened. Olivia began meticulously recording all the events in a journal, leaving a testimony for future generations. She often said, "Who knows if this is truly the end, or just the calm before something new?" One day, as they were discussing recent events, an old woman entered the bookstore. She looked very strange, dressed in a tattered cloak, with deep wrinkles on her face that seemed like ancient cracks in the earth. The woman silently approached them and placed an old, intricately decorated key on the table. "You don't know everything yet," she said in a low voice. Liam and Olivia exchanged glances. "What do you mean?" Liam asked, but the woman only smiled. "That was just the first threshold. There are 5 more sources like the one you sealed. And if even one of them awakens, darkness will return. And if even one of them awakens, darkness will return." She told them about an ancient order that had created these sources thousands of years ago to imprison a force that was too dangerous for the world. However, the order had long since fallen apart, and the knowledge of the sources had nearly vanished. You have become their new guardians, she said, looking directly into Liam and Olivia's eyes. The old woman left the key and disappeared as suddenly as she had appeared. Olivia carefully examined the key, and her heart chilled. This is the symbol from the book, she said, pointing to the old notes she had kept. This leads to the next source. And if even one of them awakens, darkness will return. Liam realized that their peace had been temporary. Now they had a new mission, to find and protect the remaining sources before someone else did. He felt that this was only the beginning of a long and dangerous journey. Olivia began preparing for the journey. She gathered all the books, maps, and notes that might help them find the other sources. Liam, in turn, armed himself, knowing that the next time they would face something worse than what they had encountered before. Before they left, they both visited the place in the forest where they had last seen Amelia. Liam placed a red rose there as a symbol of remembrance. You gave us a chance to fight, and we won't forget that, he whispered quietly. As they left Silent Creek, an uneasy silence hung in the air once again. Liam and Olivia knew that new battles, new losses, and perhaps even more terrifying creatures awaited them. But they were ready, because now they were no longer just ordinary people caught up in a battle. They had become the guardians of light in a world that hid countless secrets in its shadows. The road led them far from the familiar town, into the unknown. And somewhere in the darkness of this unknown, new evil was already waiting. Liam and Olivia traveled down a long, dark path that seemed endless. Their journey took them through abandoned villages, dense forests, and snow-covered mountains, where ancient legends seemed to come alive. Every clue, every fragment of history they found, brought them closer to the next source. But with it, they felt that something was following them. One cold night, they reached the ruins of an old monastery, buried in the mountains. Olivia checked the map to confirm that this was indeed the place where the second source should be. The feeling of unease became almost unbearable. The darkness around them was thicker than usual, and it felt as though the air itself was alive. There's something here, Liam said, pulling out his knife. Olivia stared intently into the darkness. It seemed as though shadows flickered among the ruins. They entered the monastery's central hall and saw a huge round altar with inscriptions in an ancient language. The amulet they had been carrying began to glow brightly, confirming that they had found the right place. However, before they could approach the altar, they heard a voice. You thought it would be that easy? From the darkness, a figure emerged, and Liam froze in place. It was Amelia, but her eyes were no longer warm. They glowed with a cold blue light. Amelia! He exclaimed, but she only smiled. I'm no longer who I was. When you awakened the first source, you didn't just awaken evil. You awakened me. But now I am its guide. It offered me a power I've never had, and I accepted it. Because the truth is, this world will never get better. Darkness will always prevail. Her voice was low and cold. Liam was stunned. He stepped closer, trying to find some spark of the real Amelia, but Olivia grabbed his hand. It's not her. It's a trap, she cried. Amelia laughed. Maybe it's a trap, but you've already lost. Creatures began to appear around them, beings made of shadows that seemed to be composed of nightmares themselves. They surrounded the altar, cutting off Liam and Olivia's chance to complete the ritual. But why are you doing this? You sacrificed yourself to stop this. This isn't you. Liam shouted, gripping his knife. Amelia paused for a moment, and something familiar flashed in her eyes. But it was only for an instant. It's still me, Liam, but I no longer believe in fighting. I believe in power, she said, and her voice turned cold, like ice. Olivia quickly opened the book and began to read the incantation, but the shadows started moving toward her. Liam realized there was little time left. He did what he hoped he would never have to do. Amelia, if you're still there, remember yourself. Remember that you saved us. We need you now, he said, and rushed toward her, holding the amulet in his hand. The light from the amulet flared brightly, and for a moment, It seemed as though the darkness vanished. Amelia screamed, clutching her head. Her face shifted, twisted and dark, then back to familiar. "Liam," she whispered, and this time her voice sounded like it used to. I remember, but I can't be myself anymore." "You can still fight. Darkness has no power over those who believe in the light," Liam said, gripping her hand. Her eyes filled with tears, and she nodded. "I can help you seal this. But I won't come back." Amelia raised her hands, and the darkness around them began to fade. She used the power the darkness had given her to push back the attacking creatures and created a shield for Liam and Olivia while they completed the ritual. When the final word was spoken, the altar lit up, and everything around them exploded with bright light. When the light faded, Liam and Olivia were lying on the ground among the ruins. Amelia was gone. She had left only her pendant, which Liam found near the altar. Olivia rose, breathing heavily. That was the second source. But how many more are there? And do we have the strength to finish this? Liam picked up the pendant and looked at the sky, which was clear and calm. "We can't stop. We have to finish this. For her. For everyone." Far in the distance, a faint laugh echoed. Evil had not disappeared. It had only retreated, waiting for its time. But now, Liam and Olivia had not only a mission, but also the certainty that even in the deepest darkness, there is always a chance for light. Liam and Olivia left the monastery behind, leaving in their wake a scorched earth, where only moments ago everything had been bathed in light, and now it was once again shrouded in darkness. Before them lay not only the unknown, but the heavy realization that no battle is truly over until it is won for good. They returned to Silent Creek, where a quiet but unsettling silence awaited them. The town seemed to have forgotten all the horrors that once terrorized it, but Liam felt that the war was far from over. The shadows they had defeated had retreated, but that didn't mean that evil would leave them in peace forever. Olivia, having proven her courage time and again, remained relentlessly focused on her search for knowledge. She now knew that they could not move forward without fully understanding why these sources existed and how they affected the world. One night, as the town sank into a deep sleep, Liam received an unexpected message. When he woke up, he found an old parchment on the table, clearly not belonging to anyone in their circle. The paper was covered in symbols, and while some of them were familiar, others he had never seen before. The writing was in hand, but it didn't look like anything ordinary. Liam suspected that this could be a clue to something they still didn't understand. "You have been chosen. Find the fifth source. And remember, the truth is always greater than you can imagine. Only with darkness will you see the light." These words echoed in his mind, causing a mixture of anxiety and excitement. Olivia was nearby, and upon seeing Liam holding the parchment, she immediately grabbed it from him. "Is this from the one who's been watching us?" she asked, her voice filled with fear. Liam nodded. They both knew that this new clue could be both a help and a trap. But it was the only way to learn more. Several days passed before they set out on their journey again, knowing that now they were heading toward a new source, the fifth and most difficult of them all. Their destination lay in the heart of an ancient forest, stretching far beyond the boundaries of Silent Creek. The forest, which Liam had once known as a place of danger, now seemed even more ominous, consumed by eternal darkness. The shadows appeared longer, and the trees seemed to whisper among themselves, offering no peace. As they neared the fifth source, Liam began to notice strange occurrences. Shadows would suddenly appear, with no physical form, but giving the sensation that someone was watching them. They heard voices in their heads, and it felt as though the forest was trying to take over their minds, to plunge them into its endless abyss. Olivia grew increasingly nervous, yet she stayed on course, knowing that they had to close all the sources to stop the final awakening of darkness. Finally, they reached the place where the ground began to tremble beneath their feet, where the air grew heavy, and the sunlight seemed dimmed. This was the heart of the forest, and here they felt the presence of something ancient. In the middle of a vast circle of stones stood a massive black stone, the source exuding the sensation of both death and life at once. "We have to do this together," Liam said, approaching the stone with the amulet in his hand. Olivia nodded. They began to chant the incantation, but with each word, the darkness grew thicker. Suddenly, the stone exploded, releasing a surge of dark energy that engulfed everything around them. Liam and Olivia were thrown to the ground, and the darkness consumed them. When they regained consciousness, everything was different. The stone was destroyed, but there was an absolute silence. They stood in a place that no longer resembled what it had been before. Around them stretched an empty, boundless, formless space. And there, at the very center of this void, they saw a figure. It was Amelia. Now you know. All the sources have been destroyed, but it was through them that darkness had a chance to return, she said, her voice heavy, as though it resonated throughout the endless space. But there is one more thing you didn't know. They heard voices in their heads, and it felt as though the forest was trying to take over their minds, to plunge them into its endless abyss. What? Liam asked, feeling that this might be their last chance to find an answer. Darkness and light have always been two sides of the same coin. I was only a part of it. And now, you, Liam and Olivia, have become its new bearers. You must make a choice. They heard voices in their heads, and it felt as though the forest was trying to take over their minds, to plunge them into its endless abyss. The mystery was unfolding, but the answer was so vast that Liam and Olivia felt their consciousness expanding. The choice between light and darkness was not as simple as they had imagined. The truth was greater than any knowledge they had ever understood. And now, in this endless space, Liam and Olivia had to decide whether they would be the ones to hold both light and darkness together, or whether they would allow one to consume everything around them.